Hello crafty viewers! Today's card we are making this beautiful tri-fold haunted graveyard card. So come join along as I go through the steps that I did to pull this all together. Alrighty, let's get started. So today's project uses, again, the Haunted House dies, the 2017 dies from Tim Holtz. And we actually use all three pieces, the moon, the bats, as well as the house. It also uses some of the pieces from the Village Graveyard. This is also from the 2017 Halloween Tim Holtz series. I used some Inca Gold, and I used that because I'm going to be using the Graveyard Gate from Stampin' Up! And the die from that set. So that die actually has a little lock that goes on the gate, and so that's what the Inca Gold is for. This is a die cut I got from my local craft store. It was just a small, independently owned store, and she had these trees cut, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to get one. I'm sure I can use it for something. I actually got a couple of them, so you'll see this actually featured in some other projects as well. I have a 5x7 piece of Neenah White, Solar White cardstock cut to 10x7, scored at 5 to create a 5x7 card. Now this is actually going to be a tri-fold card, so this will have the fold of the Neenah on the right hand side, and then there will be this black piece of cardstock that will form a frame that will be on the left hand side. So this is a piece of just plain black cardstock from Michaels, and it is 5.5x7 to have a 1/2 inch that will fold underneath. Don't worry about these measurements. I will have all of them on our website. There will be a link to the page in the video notes below. I have a piece of vellum that I used some yellow ink on, and I cut it to fit behind the haunted house to color in the windows. Now since that's kind of, it takes a while to get that accurately cut, I did it off camera so that you didn't have to sit here and watch me cut through all that. I also have a piece of plain black cardstock. All the black cardstock in here is from Recollections, just their $2 a package black. And I put it through my Xyron machine. This is the 5-inch Xyron, to be able to cut 2 copies of the Garden Gate, or excuse me, Graveyard Gate. And they're going to go on either side of this piece of clear plastic. So when you open the card up, you'll have Gate on both sides. And this will be sandwiched in between. This black cardstock will form a frame around it. I'm going to make some pillars for the gate, and I'm using just a piece of scrap cardstock. This came out of the architectural paper collection, also from Recollections. It's the paper pad of gray. And I have a piece of the green. This green came out of the Farmer's Market paper pack, also from Recollections. I use a lot of paper from that pack and a lot of my fall arts, and I thought that the green kind of went really well with this. Now, You could do an inked background with Distress Oxide inks. They turn out beautifully. But when I saw this paper at the craft store, I'll spin it around. This is from Ella and Viv, and it's called Starry Night. And I thought it was just perfect for a sky background, and given that it's just going to be a small portion of sky, I thought you could get a lot of uses out of this. You could probably, oh gosh, make at least 4 cards, probably 6 cards, or maybe even 8 cards, depending on how much sky you need. So I'm going to use this for the background. Now to get started. So the first thing I'm going to do off camera is cut out 2 pieces of the graveyard gate. Now I'm going to do this off camera because I'm not going to put my Big Shot on here. It doesn't cut very well, and it takes many, many passes to get through something like this, and this video would be way too long if I did that. I've pre-cut most of the pieces for this project already. It was just when I decided to use the clear plastic on the first fold side that I wanted to have 2 pieces, and to be able to glue them together, especially such fine detail that's in this die, is really hard. It's much easier if you simply take the paper and run it through, and then you have sticky all over. Now, I could have run the paper through first and then ran it through the Xyron machine, but the problem with doing that is there are so many different intricate spaces that when you run it through the Xyron, it actually will leave little residues along each of the lines, and because these are really thin, it just would have not looked real good to have all this extra residue, and then you wad it up and then it's all sticky and all over the place. So it's just easier to run the whole thing through with the sticky on the back already, and I'm going to go do that, and I will be right back. Alrighty, so got the first one done, and here I have the second one, and I just keep running it through the die machine until I see that for sure the adhesive is in all areas has been completely cut through. Now it's a little less important that the adhesive is, because if it's gotten all the way through the adhesive, it for sure has gotten through the black paper. But sometimes you can get away with not having the adhesive cut because it still has gone through the black paper. And if there is a die that is deserving of this handy-dandy little die tool, this would be it, with all these little pieces that need to come out. So let's start punching those out. It's also easy, especially on this black paper, to see which parts still need to be removed before you pull the die out. Now this came out really good. There's only a couple little tiny pieces that need to still come out, but boy, that makes quick work of that. It even got the little teeny tiny dots in between each of these here. Alrighty, so now we got two gates. One's going to go on the front side of our card, and one's going to go on the back side, just like that. And hopefully they line up when you get it on the plastic. So now let's move on to the next step. So the next step is going to be the outer flap of the card. Since this is a trifold card, and the outer flap needs to be scored at a 1/2 inch. So let's do that first. For the sake of time, I am just going to use my regular cutter and score it on that. Put the paper at a 1/2 inch. And I want to make sure, I'm actually going to do a little less than half because I want enough to wrap around. So I'm going to go a little beyond 5 on this side to make sure that there's not card on the edge showing. And boy, these little ball styluses, they make such a nice score. Okay, next, I'm going to flatten that back out because we're going to cut the frame out. Now, there's a lot going on in this card, so I'm just going to make this a very simple frame. And I'm going to line these two pieces up like that. And I'm just going to get a piece of washi tape to hold it together so that when I cut, the pieces align perfectly. And that way you don't have to worry about cutting a frame out and then finding out that they don't align, which is very frustrating. So let me grab a piece of washi. And since it's Halloween, we're just going to use some Halloween washi tape. This is just to hold the pieces together, nothing else. Okay, so I'm going to cut say 5/8 of an inch all around. So that means I want to start my blade 5/8 of an inch in, which puts it actually at 6 3/8. I have it at 5/8 on this edge. And I cut all the way up to 5/8 of an inch. Turn the card. Again, line it at 5/8. It should still be at 5/8. Now, I don't want to be fooled by this extra 1/2 inch. I want to go 5/8 of an inch, so to 4 3/8 over here. Turn the card. And now I want to cut at 5/8 on this side. So that means this fold needs to be at 5/8, which is right between 1/2 and 3/4. And the other way that you know you have it right is the edge of the card over here is at 4 3/8. So I start at 5/8 down, and I go all the way down to 6 3/8. I'm going to flip again. 5/8. So here, because I have this 1/2 inch, it's actually going to be at 4 7/8 in, because this pushed the whole thing out to 5 1/2. So that's 4 7/8. And we're going to stop at 1 1/8. And you can see as you're cutting where that's lining up to the existing cut. Now there may be a couple little edges here where it didn't go all the way through. So before I move that, I'll push it a little bit this way and make sure that way needs a little bit. So each edge, it looks like it needs just a tiny little bit. Now instead of trying to run that back through, I'm just going to take a cutting blade, and my grid mat is a cutting mat, besides being a work surface, and I'll just finish that cut. Just the tiniest little bit. So now you have two pieces that are perfectly aligned. The cuts will match up exactly. Now, this piece here, you know what? I'm going to save that. I'm sure I will put it to good use in some other project. So now we have that done. And we can take and clean up some of these little edges here. And I'm actually going to leave that stuck together for the time being so that I can put my piece of clear cardstock in the middle. Now what this does is this provides a base for these to attach to so they're not flopping around. I probably don't need it, but you know what? I didn't want to take a chance. And this plastic has a protective coating on one side, and the only way that you can get it to come off is just to keep pulling at it until you get the edge. Now I cut this to be just a tiny bit narrower to make sure that I had enough room to tape and I didn't have to worry about being real exact. So I will actually just run my tape runner around the frame, and that way this will stick down. Now this is a nice hinge here. Everything was aligned. And I'm just going to close it back up. It should remain aligned. And look at that. Perfect. Now I can take the washi off.